The unraveling of a person doesn't always come with grand events. Sometimes it's just a string of days lived in a fragmented state, working without focus, speaking without connection, resting without recovery, laughing without joy, silent without peace. Each such day is a small crack in the soul. And then one day you look at yourself and no longer recognize who you are because you've lived too long in the noise of the world, so long that you've lost the voice inside you. The question is not, are you living, but rather, are you living in presence or just unconsciously reacting to the world? Because there's one truth you need to accept. If you don't master your mental space, the world will do it for you. Every time you reach for your phone, you hand over control. Every time you let yourself be swept into a stream of information without knowing what you're looking for, you allow the outside to define who you are. And if that keeps happening, you will become a product of what you consume instead of the creator of the reality you wish to live. Have you ever felt exhausted without doing anything? That's the sign of a mind scattered for too long. Have you ever found it hard to breathe, even when there's no obvious pressure? That's because your mind is racing over things that don't matter. Have you ever tried to find an answer to a hollow feeling without knowing where to start? That's because you haven't listened to yourself in silence for too long. Not silence out of sadness, but intentional stillness, where everything becomes clearer, simpler, and deeper. We don't have to abandon this world, but we must refuse to let the world shape us unconsciously, and that begins by reclaiming inner space. Space to breathe, space to observe without reacting, space to listen without rushing to respond, space to recognize yourself without needing validation from another's eyes. Only when you have that space can you stand firm amidst the noise, because then you are no longer being pulled. You have become your own center. The world will not become quieter just because you wish it to be. It will only get faster, louder, more overwhelming. But that doesn't mean you have to follow. You have the right to choose. You can start with small actions. Turn off your phone for 30 minutes each morning. Sit with yourself for 10 minutes each night. No music, no screen, no words, just you and the true rhythm of presence. At first, you'll feel uneasy, as if something is missing. But then you'll realize nothing is missing. You're simply returning. And in that return, you will rediscover something you thought was lost, your power. Not the kind of power that's loud and explosive, but the quiet, steady kind, unshakable, a calm that cannot be broken, a light that doesn't need to make a sound, a kind of presence that simply by being there changes everything. People won't understand what you're doing, but they will feel it, because presence doesn't speak, but it transforms. That is why most people who are truly strong, truly awakened, all begin from a deeply quiet place, where there are no more applause, no more lights, no more outside noise, only an unflinching encounter between them and their true essence. And from that encounter, they emerge, not needing to prove anything, but carrying a force that cannot be named. You can begin the same way. You don't need to retreat to a mountain. You don't need to change your entire life. All you need is a moment, a space, one small choice to pause, to withdraw from the noise and return to yourself, even if just for a few minutes each day. Because sometimes all it takes is for you to be quiet enough, and you'll finally hear what you've been searching for your whole life. There is a kind of emptiness that most people try to avoid. They fill it with work, entertainment, rushed conversations, or seemingly harmless things like news, movies, and social media. But what they're truly running from is not out there. It's within their own minds. It is the inner void, the space where, when there is no more stimulation, no more sounds to distract, no more people to blame or compare yourself to, you are forced to face the truest part of yourself. And that is something very few dare to do. We live in an era where everything demands instant reactions. Every minute brings a new notification, a new story, a new trend to catch up on. The more choices we have, the more we believe we are free. But in reality, that freedom is pulling us into a constant cycle of reaction, where there's no longer room to pause. And so the empty space, once a place for recovery, creativity, and awakening, has been labeled forbidden ground. We've begun to fear stillness, not because it's dangerous, but because it's too real. In stillness, there's no one left to impress, nothing to perform. You're no longer shielded by your job or your relationships. There is only you and the unanswered questions. Who am I? What am I living for? Am I truly happy? What am I chasing after? And what am I running from? It is in those moments that you begin to see every mask you've worn. You realize how long you've lived for other people's expectations. You see the rigidity in your thoughts, the fragility in your emotions, and the fear that quietly lingers behind all outward success. These truths are not easy to look at, but there is no other way to return to the wholeness of who you are without going through that empty space. The irony is that emptiness is not your enemy. It is a doorway, a path that moves in the opposite direction of the crowd, a road back to clarity, to depth, to a state of awareness no one else can give you but yourself. The empty space doesn't mean you're losing something. On the contrary, it is where you begin to recover the parts of yourself that have been forgotten, suppressed, or silenced for far too long. Observe the truly strong people. They are not the loudest, not the ones always in the spotlight. They are the ones who can sit alone in silence without fear. They do not need validation. They do not need noise to feel valuable, because their value lies not in what they possess or display, but in the steadiness that comes from within. That steadiness is nourished in the empty space. We are often taught what we must do to succeed, but rarely does anyone tell us, before doing, you must learn not to do. You must learn how to sit still, to listen, and to remove what's unnecessary. Like a garden, before something new can grow, you must first clear away the weeds. And the first thing to clear is your attachment to sound, to action, to the endless need for filling every moment. When you dare to step into the empty space, you begin to feel something that many people never touch in a lifetime. That is the inner clarity. No more noise, no more reactivity, no more proving, just you. And a quiet stream of awareness, steady and deep like an underground spring. From there, your choices become sharper, no longer driven by trends, no longer dictated by expectations, but guided by the truth you've seen in silence. The void is also where you learn a crucial skill that no school teaches, the ability to be present, not thinking about the past, not rushing to the future, just fully inhabiting the moment that is unfolding. And when you can live like that, you'll discover a profound truth. You don't need much to feel whole. You don't need achievements to feel worthy. You don't need noise to feel alive, because you are already enough in the stillness itself. Don't fear the void. Fear living your entire life without ever truly connecting with yourself. Fear reaching the end of your days having never carved out a space for your soul to breathe. Because once you begin to accept the emptiness, to appreciate it, to nurture it, you will discover this: everything you've ever searched for out there can be found in that silent space. Love, creativity, peace, even freedom. The empty space is not something to avoid, but something to train. Like a muscle, your ability to tolerate silence must be built gradually. You don't need to meditate for 3 hours a day. Just start with 5 minutes. Turn off all sounds and let your mind rest. The first 5 minutes will be the hardest. But if you make it through, you'll realize there is an unexplored landscape inside you, and it's waiting for your return. Pause for a moment. Really pause and ask yourself, the voice you hear in your head every day, is it truly your own? Or is it just an echo of your parents, society, friends, of the standards you never created but are striving desperately to meet? How many decisions in your life have truly come from your heart? And how many were made just to please others, to avoid criticism, to not fall behind in a noisy world that constantly tells you to become someone? There is a truth that is light, quiet, but once you dare to look at it, you can never turn away again. Most of what you think is you is actually a combination of external influences repeated so many times that you've come to believe it is your own self. But deep inside, there is another you, a very real, very personal self that has never spoken up, simply because it's never had the chance to be heard. We grow up in a world that never teaches us how to listen to ourselves. As a child, you were taught to be good, to be excellent, to get high grades, to make your parents proud. Then, as you got older, you were told to get a good job, have a stable income, look attractive, build an impressive social media profile, and have a future others admire. You followed it all, did it all, and sometimes you even succeeded. But then one day, you suddenly feel empty inside. Not because you failed, but because at the very moment you are most praised, you feel more disconnected from yourself than ever before. Because what you achieved is not what you truly desired. It's just what you thought you should desire because someone once said so. And if you don't stop, if you don't turn inward and ask, who am I? What do I truly want? Then you will live your entire life as a programmed copy, perhaps successful on the surface, but internally tired, confused, and lost. I'm not saying that the influence of others is inherently bad, but if you don't learn how to filter it, you'll become a container filled with all those noises, leaving no space for your true voice. And when the time comes to make a major decision, you won't know what to choose, because you've never lived with yourself long enough to understand what truly moves your heart. So I ask you, when was the last time you sat down and wrote what you really want? Not what you should want, not what others tell you to dream of, but something that when you think of it, your heart trembles because you know it's the deepest part of you speaking. If you've ever felt that way, then you still have every chance to return to yourself. And if you're still reading this, it might mean that something inside you is already beginning to shift. Not loudly, not explosively, just a quiet heartbeat saying, I want to live authentically. I don't want to repeat anymore. I want to be heard. If that's what you're feeling, leave a comment below with a simple number, 11. No explanation needed, no long message. Just one number to let me know you're still here, present, sincere, and longing for something different for yourself. And to you who has paused to feel, I send my deepest thanks, because in a world full of reactions, you've chosen awareness. Amidst thousands of voices, you're beginning to listen to your own. From this moment on, start practicing one thing. Ask a question before everything you do. Who am I doing this for? Why am I choosing this? Do I truly believe this, or am I just repeating someone else's belief? Every time you pause to ask is a moment you step away from the crowd to return to your true self, and if you're patient, you'll begin to hear a new voice. Very small, very gentle, but incredibly clear. That's your voice. Unaffected, not needing to be right, not needing applause, just needing to live as it truly is. And that very voice will become your compass. In times of fatigue, it gives you a reason to keep going. In moments of confusion, it keeps you from straying. In the face of tough choices, it helps you break free from old expectations and follow your own path, even if it looks unlike anyone else's. But this must be emphasized. You cannot hear that voice if you don't create space for it. Your mind is constantly occupied. If you're always pulled by others' stories, if you never dare to be alone, you will never know who you are. So begin creating that space, not just in your outer life, but in your mind. React less, prove less, rush less, listen more, feel more, connect with yourself without needing a reason. And remember, you don't need all the answers right away. You just need to be honest enough to ask, and the inner voice will begin to speak. And when that happens, you will no longer live as a copy. You will live as a one-of-a-kind original, a person with clear direction, depth, and a quiet strength, born from knowing who you truly are. It is no coincidence that every wise tradition in the world, from east to west, from ancient to modern, emphasizes the value of stillness. Stillness is not merely the absence of sound. It is an inner space where all disturbances are removed, where original wisdom, untainted by the outside world, has a chance to awaken. We often admire intelligence, quick thinking, innate talent, but rarely are we taught that there is a form of wisdom far beyond what we learn from books, schools, or experience. That is inner wisdom. And it only emerges when the mind is still enough. In daily life, we react constantly. Most decisions don't come from clarity, but from habit, the habit of thinking in familiar patterns, of reacting emotionally, of reasoning based on what is considered right. But if we take a pause, truly pause, and do nothing for a few minutes, you'll see the mind start to stir. Thoughts dance around, anxieties tangle, images, memories, voices, all rise as if they've never been cleared. That's why many people can't bear stillness, because it forces us to face the truth. Our inner world is in chaos, but for that very reason, stillness is precious. It marks the beginning of a cleansing process. Stillness doesn't come from the environment. You don't have to climb a mountain, retreat to a forest, or leave the city to find it. Stillness is something you create from within, right in the middle of traffic, in the middle of a meeting, in the messiness of daily life. If you train yourself to turn inward, to disconnect from the noisy flow outside, you can still touch that space. And from that space, all clarity begins. Imagine your inner wisdom as a still body of water. Only when the surface is calm can you see the true sky reflected. But if you constantly stir it through reaction, fear, expectation, or others' opinions, then no matter how clear the sky is, you'll only see the distortion created by your own mind. Every piece of advice from the outside, every tool, every course, every book, no matter how great, becomes useless if your mind isn't still enough to receive it deeply. In stillness, you don't just see what's happening inside you, you begin to recognize what no longer serves your journey. It might be an outdated mindset, a limiting belief, a fear carried since childhood, a wound never healed. When you have enough courage to sit in silence and face those things, not judging, not rejecting, your inner wisdom will begin to speak. And that voice is unlike any sound you've ever heard. It is not loud, not boastful. It is simply a clarity, a decisiveness, and a peace that is strangely profound. You don't need to try to understand it, because when it comes, you will know without needing to explain. That is the power of original wisdom, not conditioned by anyone, not controlled by circumstances, not distorted by ego. A person with inner wisdom is not someone who knows everything, but someone who maintains clarity in the face of everything. They don't need to react immediately. They are not swept away by public opinion. They don't make decisions out of fear of missing out. They act from a solid center, built from stillness. And so their actions carry depth, gravity, and often produce results far beyond others. Recall those moments when you had a strong intuition, when you had no data, no logic, no analysis, but you knew what was right and you acted on it. Most of the most important decisions in your life didn't come from reason. They came from stillness. And that wisdom, that intuition is not luck. It is your deepest instinct connecting to a form of understanding beyond logic. And to sustain that connection, you need to train your ability to live in stillness every day. Start simply, 5 minutes each morning. Turn off all devices. No music, no images. Just sit with your breath. If thoughts arise, let them pass like clouds. Don't force them away. Don't try to be empty. As long as you don't cling to them, your mind will gradually grow quiet. And in that quiet, true wisdom, not from outside, will begin to speak, at first very softly. But the more you practice, the more you'll realize you don't need many things to know what is right. You just need to be still enough. This world needs more people like that. People who don't just learn how to speak, but also learn how to listen. Not just listen to others, but first to themselves. Not to find the right answer, but to rediscover a connection that once was very close, but got lost in the noise. And when you find that peace again, you won't have to search so much anymore, because you will possess something very few do, an inner compass that always guides you in the right direction, no matter how much the world around you changes. Most of us don't live by choice. We live by reaction. Something happens, someone says something, the environment changes, expectations are broken, and we react immediately, quickly, unconsciously, emotionally, like a switch being flipped without us even realizing we've been triggered. And it's that way of living that exhausts us, because when you live in reaction, you are no longer the subject. You're just a link in a chain of conditioning the world has created for you. So reaction is instinct. Choice is consciousness. Reaction is instant. Choice requires a pause. Reaction comes from fear, wounds, and outdated beliefs. Choice arises from presence and awareness. And that's why most people can't choose. They don't have the time to pause between stimulus and action. They get swept up in speed, in the demands of modern life, in the need to prove themselves, to respond instantly, to keep up. But in truth, the most valuable thing you can do for yourself is to create a small space right in the middle of the situation where you no longer react, instead you choose. You can't control everything that happens to you, but you always have the right to choose how you respond. And in that choice lies the entire difference between someone controlled by the world and someone who takes ownership of their destiny. That doesn't mean you must always be calm, always right, always in perfect control. It simply means you are awake enough not to be swept away every time life throws a wave of emotion at you. Only then do you begin to experience true freedom. Freedom doesn't mean the absence of challenges. Freedom means you're no longer pulled by every external influence. Someone might insult you, but you don't have to get angry. Someone might leave you, but you don't have to fall apart. Something might not go as planned, but you don't have to collapse with it. Because within you, there is already a place of light. A place you can only access when you choose not to react anymore. You pause, you observe, you breathe, you become present. And then you act from clarity, not from fear. That might sound simple, but in reality, to build that ability, you need deep daily training. You must learn to feel emotions without being fused with them. When anger arises, you don't suppress it, but you also don't let it drive your actions. When fear surfaces, you don't deny it, but you also don't let it rewrite your decision. And that only happens when you train presence as a way of life, not as a temporary technique. Start with the smallest things. When someone says something that hurts you, take a deep breath before replying. When you receive bad news, place your hand on your chest and ask, what's my first reaction? And is that reaction really how I want to respond? Every time you do this, you're inserting a pause between stimulus and response. And that very pause, however short, is the space where you reclaim control of your life. Once you master that pause, you no longer fear adversity, because you know, no matter what happens, you can choose how you walk through it. No one can take that ability from you unless you forget that you have it. That's something wise people never forget. They don't live by reaction. They live with clear intention, with inner composure, with wisdom nurtured from within, not from what the world deems rational. And it is those people who truly change the world, because they are not swept up by it. They stand in the storm, but do not let the winds carry them away. They make decisions not to please anyone, not to win arguments, but to embody the person they choose to become. Every action they take is a conscious choice, emerging from the deepest part of a trained mind. And because of that, every action carries weight, meaning, and depth. If you want to begin that journey, you don't need anything complicated. Just remind yourself every day, I don't have to react. I can choose. And repeat that as a sacred reminder every time the world demands you react immediately. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to respond to every attack. You don't need to explain every decision, because you know your peace does not lie in being understood by others, but in living true to yourself. And the miracle is, when you live like that, the world starts responding to you differently. It slows down. It respects you more. It no longer dares to pull your strings like before. Because you are no longer easily manipulated. You are the one who chooses. And in that choosing, not only do you master your mind, you master your fate. The weak often fear being alone, not because they hate silence, but because they cannot bear the echo of their own inner world. They need something external to fill the void within, a video, a song, a meaningless conversation, or simply the noise of social media, where they don't have to face their true self. They don't realize that what they're trying so hard to escape is the very thing that could help them grow. The truth is, most of us were never taught how to sit still. We grew up in environments where silence was labeled as negative, as loneliness, uselessness, having nothing to do. And so we learned to live by filling with actions, filling with words, filling with one goal after another, never pausing to ask whether we truly need all of it. But have you ever stopped to wonder, why would a person need to live in constant noise? Noise, whether from the outside world or within the mind, is always a sign of an ungrounded inner life. It is the result of a deep insecurity, where a person constantly needs to affirm their worth through interaction. They cannot endure a moment with no messages, no calls, no one listening, because in those moments, they feel they don't exist. But true existence does not depend on external validation. It comes from inner steadiness, something you can only build when you are brave enough to face stillness. The strong do not need noise to feel worthy. They do not need agreement to feel right. They don't need to speak at all times, to share everything, or to explain themselves, because they have once walked through solitude and found themselves in it. They have sat quietly with pain, with conflict, with unanswerable questions, and did not run. They have learned how to act without waiting for the world to nod in approval. And that's what makes them unshakable. Stillness is not avoidance, it is a proactive state. It's when you see the noisy movement of the world and choose not to be swept away. It's when you feel the wave rise within and you choose not to let it dictate your behavior. It's when you have every right to speak, but you choose silence because you know words at that moment are unnecessary. And to live that way, you must build an inner foundation, one that cannot be bought with money, cannot be earned in a short course, but is the result of daily discipline. Look at the most successful, thoughtful, trustworthy people you know. Don't they all have one thing in common? Composure. They are not shaken by every little change. They don't need to constantly speak out to prove themselves. Wherever they are, there's a strange and powerful presence. That's not an inborn trait. It's the fruit of a lived journey, of moments spent sitting alone, not reacting, asking profound questions of themselves. I'm not saying you need to become a monk or a recluse, but you do need to learn how to return to your inner space every day, just 10 minutes. No phone, no calls, no notes, no expectations, just you and presence, just you and the breath, just you and the seemingly meaningless silence, which is actually where all true meaning begins. At first, you'll feel discomfort. You'll feel emptiness. You'll feel like doing nothing is a waste. But if you can move past that feeling, you will begin to see something you've never seen before, your real self. And once you reconnect with your true self, you won't need the noise anymore. You will begin to recognize the difference between necessary sound to live and the kind of noise that pulls you away from yourself. You'll know when to speak and when to remain silent, when to act and when to stay still, when to move quickly and when to pause deeply. The stillness within you will become the compass for every decision, and then you will see. You are no longer chasing the world. The world will revolve around someone who has found themselves. Do not underestimate the power of silence. It is not emptiness, it is the space where truth rises. In a world where everyone rushes to speak, to prove, to appear, the one who dares to be still is the one swimming against the current. And in that countercurrent, they may find what the entire world is missing: depth, wisdom, and peace. that no one can take away. When you look at the lives of great individuals, you may see their achievements, the spotlight, the brilliant results they've contributed to the world. But there's one thing few people notice. Behind every major decision, every transformation, every moment that changed history, there is always a moment of stillness, a space where they withdrew from the world to reconnect with themselves. That space never appears in biographies. It has no glamorous image to display, but it is where great ideas are born. It is where resilient souls listen to the true calling from within. Don't be fooled by the vibrant surface of success. Great people do not grow up in the crowd. They grow in solitude. They don't become extraordinary by blending into the noise. They become extraordinary because they dared to step away from it. Let's get something straight. Fear is not your enemy. Fear is instinct. It's ancient. It's built into your biology to protect you. And in many ways, it's kept you alive. But what fear was never meant to do is lead you. It was never meant to be your guide, your counselor, your decision maker. Yet that's exactly what most people let it become. They let fear steer the wheel. And then they wonder why their life feels like it's going in circles. You feel fear when you're about to do something unfamiliar, something risky, something that threatens your comfort or control. That's not weakness. That's your brain doing what it's been wired to do. But here's the truth most never hear. Fear itself isn't what stops you. Inaction is. The real enemy isn't the fear you feel. It's the pause you take because of it. It's the opportunity you don't chase, the silence you choose instead of speaking up, the dream you shelve for some other time. Most people are waiting for fear to disappear before they take action. They're waiting to feel brave, to feel certain, but that moment never comes, because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's action taken in spite of it. And if you're waiting to feel ready, you'll be waiting your whole life. The ones who move mountains, change industries, make history, they feel fear too, but they walk forward anyway. That's the shift. That's the edge. You don't need to be fearless. You just need to stop obeying fear like it's a command. You need to stop giving it authority it never earned. Fear can sit in the passenger seat, sure, but it doesn't touch the wheel, not anymore. And here's where it gets powerful. The more you move through fear, the smaller it becomes. Every time you act when you're afraid, you teach your brain that fear doesn't mean stop. It means this matters. It means step up. It means you're getting close to something important. Repetition rewires reality. And the more you face fear head on, the less control it has over you. You become something fear can't live inside, because you've trained your mind to act before fear can settle in. So the next time fear rises in your chest, remember this: you don't need less fear. You need more movement. Don't analyze. Don't overthink. Don't negotiate. Just move, because fear hates momentum. And the moment you act, the fear begins to die. Fear is a master storyteller. It crafts lies so believable, so emotionally convincing that they feel like truth. But here's the brutal fact. Fear is a liar. And the most dangerous lies it tells are about you. It whispers that you're not ready, that you're not smart enough, talented enough, worthy enough, that if you try, you'll fail, that if you speak, they'll laugh, that if you chase that dream, you'll crash and burn. And because fear wears the voice of your own mind, you believe it. You accept it as reality, never realizing that it's just a story you've repeated so many times it became familiar. Not true, just familiar. Fear thrives in imagination. It takes a moment of uncertainty and builds a movie around it. You don't just worry about a difficult conversation. You see it go horribly wrong. You don't just hesitate to try something new. You see yourself failing publicly and permanently. You don't just fear rejection. You imagine humiliation, abandonment, and proof that you never had what it takes in the first place. And that's how fear wins. Not with truth, but with repetition. The more you rehearse the worst-case scenario in your mind, the more your nervous system believes it's real. And when your brain believes the threat is real, it floods your body with signals to retreat. Heart racing, breath shallow, muscles tense. Suddenly you're not living in the present. You're imprisoned in a future that hasn't even happened. And in that state, even the smallest step forward feels impossible. But here's the breakthrough. If fear is built by repetition, so is confidence. If fear is a story, you can tell a better one. One where you speak and you're heard, one where you leap and you land, one where you fail and rise anyway. Because the truth is, the mind can't tell the difference between imagination and memory. If you can visualize defeat, you can visualize victory. If you can rehearse disaster, you can also rehearse domination. This is the battlefield, not out there, but in here. And the moment you stop accepting fear's script and start rewriting it, you take back control. You don't have to feel brave to act brave. You don't have to feel certain to move forward. You just have to stop giving fear the mic, because the voice in your head is powerful, but it doesn't always tell the truth. And the biggest lie it tells is that fear is your limit. It's not. It's your signal. It's the flag that says you're standing at the edge of your growth. And what happens next? That's up to you. Fear grows in the dark, in silence, in avoidance. The more you run from it, the bigger it gets. The more you try to outthink it, the louder it becomes. Because fear doesn't shrink with time. It shrinks with exposure. And this is where most people get it wrong. They wait for courage to arrive before they take the leap. They wait for the fear to fade before they take the first step. But courage doesn't come before action. It comes because of action. Imagine standing at the edge of a freezing pool. You can dip your toe in, walk away, come back tomorrow, overthink it again, and still feel cold just looking at it. Or you can jump in, shock your system, let your body adapt, and in a few seconds you're no longer afraid. Why? Because you've experienced what your mind exaggerated. That's exposure. It's not about being fearless. It's about being willing to feel the fear and still step forward, willing to look uncertainty in the eye and say, you're not the end, you're the beginning. This is how you kill fear. Not with avoidance, but with exposure. You lean into what terrifies you. You practice the uncomfortable. You make it familiar. And the more familiar it becomes, the less power it holds over you. Speak even when your voice trembles. Show up even when your hands shake. Launch the idea even if it's imperfect. Ask the question even if you fear the answer. That's the work. That's the training ground. Because repetition rewires reality. The first time is terrifying. The second time is uncomfortable. The 10th time is routine. And the 100th time, it's freedom. The people you admire, the speakers, the leaders, the creators, the fighters, they didn't start brave. They started scared. The only difference is they refused to stay that way. They built tolerance to discomfort. They didn't run from the storm. They stepped into it again and again until the thunder couldn't shake them anymore. The truth is, the fear never fully leaves. But you stop flinching when it speaks. You stop shrinking when it rises. Because you've faced it enough times to know it's just a sound. It's just a signal. And it doesn't have the final word. You do. The only way out is through. Through the trembling, through the failure, through the doubt. You walk straight into the storm, not because you're unafraid, but because you know the other side of fear holds the life you haven't lived yet. And that's a price worth paying. If you want to kill fear, you must go to its source, your mind. Because fear doesn't start in the world. It starts in your thoughts, in the silent, invisible stories you repeat to yourself. Stories of inadequacy, of danger, of what might go wrong. Stories that play on a loop, shaping your reality without you even realizing it. And here's the truth. If you don't train your thoughts, they will train you. Left unchecked, the mind becomes a battlefield where fear always wins. But you're not here to be ruled by fear. You're here to reclaim your mind, to take back the pen and write a new script. And it begins with this simple but powerful realization. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. You are the architect, the programmer, the one who chooses what gets to stay. So when fear whispers, you're not ready, you don't just accept it. You question it. You respond, says who? When it says you'll fail, you reply, maybe. But I'll learn. You flip the script. You disrupt the pattern, because every thought is a seed, and what you water grows. If you water fear, you'll harvest hesitation. But if you water courage, if you flood your mind with powerful, intentional, disciplined thoughts, then boldness becomes your default. This isn't about blind positivity. It's about intentional mental conditioning. The same way athletes train their bodies, warriors train their reflexes, and musicians train their fingers, you must train your mind with affirmations that declare your worth, with visualization that locks your eyes on the outcome, with repetition that makes greatness feel familiar. Tell yourself what you want to believe until it becomes who you are. Speak it, feel it, act on it every day. I am calm under pressure. I face fear and move anyway. I don't shrink, I expand. These aren't just words, they're commands, and your subconscious is always listening. And don't just think these thoughts, live them. Let your actions reflect your new identity. Your mind learns by watching you. So when you do something bold, when you move despite the nerves, when you speak up despite the shaking hands, your brain registers, we do hard things now. That's how identity changes. That's how fear loses control. You're not weak for having fear, but you stay weak if you let it lead. Discipline your inner world, and the outer world will bend to meet it. Guard your thoughts like a vault. Interrupt the lies. Install the truth. And remember that you always have a choice. Fear may visit, but it doesn't get to stay unless you open the door. Train your mind, or be trained by fear. The choice is always yours. What if fear wasn't a stop sign, but a signal? What if the very thing you're avoiding is the thing you're meant to do? You see, most people think fear means don't. Don't go there. Don't try that. Don't speak up. Don't risk it. But in reality, fear is often a compass. It points toward the edge of your comfort zone, and that's exactly where growth begins. That fire you feel in your chest, that trembling in your hands, that's not weakness. That's life, reminding you that you're standing on the edge of something important. That's your spirit recognizing a moment of truth, because the things that scare you the most are usually the things that will grow you the most. Public speaking, launching the business, ending the toxic relationship, stepping into your purpose. These aren't dangers, they're doorways, and the key to unlocking them is action, not perfection, not certainty, just movement. One step forward, straight into the thing that terrifies you. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision to move in its presence. So when fear shows up, don't shrink. Lean in. Lean toward the fire. Let it sharpen you. Let it burn away your excuses. Let it become fuel. That resistance you feel, it means you're getting close to something real, close to your calling, close to your next level. And let me tell you something most people won't. The fear never fully disappears. Not for the brave, not for the successful, not for the legends. The fear is still there. But they've made peace with it. They've learned to walk with it, to keep going, even while shaking. That's what makes them fearless. Not that they feel nothing, but that they refuse to be owned by it. So the next time fear shows up, say, thank you, I see you, but I'm not stopping. And then take that step, make the call, hit publish, say yes, say no, say the thing that scares you. The moment you lean toward the fire, then the fear begins to fade, and what's left is freedom. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear. You will not become fearless by waiting to feel brave. You don't kill fear with feelings. You kill fear with discipline. Motivation comes and goes. It's a spark, quick, loud, exciting, but short-lived. Discipline, on the other hand, is the steady flame. It's the engine behind every fearless life. Because when you train yourself to act, not when you feel like it, but when it needs to be done, you become dangerous. You become untouchable. Courage isn't a lightning bolt. It's a decision. A daily decision to show up, to do the hard things, to lean into the discomfort again and again, even when your mind screams for safety, especially then. This is what the greats understand. They don't wait for confidence. They act, and confidence catches up. They don't wait for the fear to vanish. They do the thing anyway, and fear learns it has no place there. Discipline silences fear because it removes the negotiation. There's no debate, no should I or shouldn't I. It's already been decided. The alarm rings, you rise, the task is hard, you do it anyway. The voice of doubt whispers, you walk forward in spite of it. That's discipline, and that's how the fearless are made. You see, the more you act in the presence of fear, the more you rewire your mind. You condition it to understand fear is not danger, it's data. And data doesn't control you, it informs you. So ask yourself, are you living by feeling or are you living by principle? If fear is still calling the shots, then it's time to shift. Build rituals that strengthen your mind. Surround yourself with reminders of your vision. Keep your commitments to yourself. One small act of courage every single day, and you'll wake up one day wondering why you ever let fear run the show. Discipline makes you consistent, and consistency makes you inevitable. Picture this. You're lying on your deathbed moments from the end. Around you are not just memories, but the ghosts of every dream you didn't pursue, every risk you never took, every version of you that could have existed. And they look at you with one question. Why did you let fear decide for you? You see, fear doesn't just steal your moments. It steals your legacy. It convinces you to shrink, to play safe, to sit down when you were built to stand tall. But what if you knew the cost? What if you could see the future that fear is quietly robbing you of? Because that's the thing. Most people don't realize they're choosing fear. They think they're choosing comfort, safety, familiarity. But what they're really doing is burying their greatness under excuses. They're trading impact for ease, legacy for security. Let me be clear. No one remembers the man who stayed silent. No one builds statues for the woman who avoided failure. The world is moved by those who were scared and moved anyway, by those who stood up, spoke out, and stepped forward in spite of the trembling in their voice or the knot in their stomach. Fear will always offer you comfort, but legacy demands discomfort. It demands pain, sacrifice, risk. It demands that you decide what matters more, the opinions of others or the opinion you'll have of yourself when your time is up. So ask yourself right now, what will your life say when you're gone? Will it whisper of mischances and silent regrets? Or will it roar with the sound of someone who chose purpose over paralysis, action over avoidance, courage over comfort? You don't need to know every step. You just need to refuse to let fear have the final word, because your legacy is being written either way, and only one version ends with you free. If fear is a liar, then your routine is the truth teller, because it's not just mindset that slays fear, it's movement. It's not about one big heroic act. It's about the habits that turn courage into your natural state. The fearless aren't born brave. They're forged by discipline. And every day they perform small rituals that suffocate fear before it has a chance to speak. Start here. Each morning, do something uncomfortable. Not huge, not reckless, just something that makes your heart beat a little faster. Cold shower, honest conversation, a hard phone call. Why? Because the nervous system must be trained. And when you teach your body to survive discomfort, fear begins to lose its grip. Second, move. Physically move. Whether it's lifting, running, walking, motion kills stagnation. And stagnation is fear's playground. When you move your body, your brain follows. Confidence builds. Clarity returns. Energy rises. And fear has no room in a body that's in motion. Third, speak power into your mind. Affirmation isn't corny. It's war. The thoughts you rehearse become the beliefs you carry. Every morning, stand tall and say, I am not afraid. I am not here to shrink. I am here to lead. Say it until you believe it, then act in a way that makes it true. Fourth, win the first battle. Make your bed. Show up on time. Finish the task you don't want to, because when you start your day with a win, fear loses a piece of its power. And when you stack those wins, you build momentum. And momentum is what makes the impossible feel inevitable. Lastly, reflect. Each night, ask yourself, where did fear whisper today, and where did I push back? This is how you refine. This is how you get sharper. You become unshakable, not by avoiding fear, but by facing it again and again and until it breaks before you do. The fearless life is not an accident. It is crafted with intention, with repetition, with ruthless self-respect. If you want to kill fear, don't wait to feel brave. Train it, build it, practice it, one bold action at a time. Today, we don't just talk about fear, we lay it to rest. Because the truth is, fear dies when you stop feeding it, when you stop bowing to it, when you realize it has no real authority, only the power you've given it. And from this moment on, you take that power back. No more waiting, no more hesitation, no more shrinking to fit the comfort of others or the lies of your past. You were not born to live small. You were not designed to tiptoe through life avoiding danger. You were built to walk through fire and come out forged. So this is the moment. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Now you bury the fear. You silence the doubt. You take the first step, and then another, until you no longer remember what it felt like to be ruled by hesitation. And when fear shows its face again, as it always will, you will smile. Because now you know its game. You've studied it, outlasted it. You've trained your mind and body to walk forward anyway. Fear doesn't get a vote in your future anymore. Only your vision does, only your mission does. So stand up, straighten your spine, and look fear in the face one last time. Say thank you for the lessons, for the growth, for the clarity. And then say goodbye, because you're done letting fear decide who you get to be. This is your time now. You are fearless because you chose to be. To face the question, who am I really? What do I truly need, and what am I living for? No one can answer that question for you, and you won't be able to hear the answer unless you are still enough. Those who bring about real change are not the ones who speak the most, appear the most, or are celebrated the most. They're the ones who dare to stand outside the crowd and listen to what the world has not yet recognized. They are the ones who know how to enter the empty space, not fearing it, but treasuring it, because they understand that in a world where everyone is filling every moment with action, the one who preserves space is the one who preserves the capacity for deep thought. Einstein once said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge." But he could not have imagined anything had he not given his mind the stillness to wander freely. Steve Jobs did not invent the iPhone in the middle of endless meetings. He walked alone for hours each day. He reflected. He listened. He let his mind drift toward that empty space where there was no pressure, no expectation, no interruption. And from that space, he heard what the world had yet to say. If you want to go further, if you want to live a life that is not just reactive, not just chasing after what others are doing, then you too must learn how to enter your own empty space. It may not be comfortable at first. You will feel lost. You will feel bored, even anxious. But that discomfort is proof that you are touching a new layer of consciousness, a layer that most have not dared to enter, a layer where great individuals have spent long periods digging deep, clearing away, finding the real. The empty space is not a void. It is fertile ground where seeds of ideas, intuition, and wisdom can take root. But no one can plant anything if they're constantly pacing back and forth on that land. You have to stop. You have to sit down. You have to remain silent long enough to see that behind the noisy dust, there is still a quiet stream. And that stream is where true creativity begins. Great people don't chase after information. They filter. They don't rush to make decisions. They absorb every detail. They don't react, they observe. And from that observation, they make a single choice, but one that can change the entire direction. Not because they're smarter, but because they are quieter. While the world is swept away by data, trends, urgency, they still hold on to one thing: depth. Depth doesn't come from the number of books you read. It comes from your ability to pause, to digest, to reflect, to integrate. It doesn't come from the liveliest conversations, but from the hours you sit alone, facing what you've never spoken. A person of depth is someone who does not fear the empty space. They enter it and emerge stronger than before. If you dream of an extraordinary life, don't only think about what you need to add, skills, relationships, opportunities. Think about what you need to subtract. Distractions, unnecessary noise, shallow conversations, and habits that distance you from yourself. Only when you remove enough does the empty space appear, and when it appears, you will understand why all great people go there. Not because it is pleasant, but because it is real. Because it is the place where they are no longer copies of someone else, but fully themselves, whole, original, and unshakable. Most of us grow up with a quiet bias. That empty space signifies an ending, a sign of loss, of absence, of having nothing left to give. In modern environments where productivity is measured by constant activity, where success is defined by always having something going on, empty space is often seen as failure. But that is completely wrong. Empty space is not the end of a process. It is the beginning of something deeper, more original, more creative, if you are quiet enough to remain in it. Think back to all the times you were truly creative, when you actually thought of something new or felt a deep truth. They didn't come when you were frantically doing something else. They didn't arrive while you were buried in demands, meetings, or urgent messages. They came in quiet moments, alone on a long ride, standing under the shower, or sitting still on a purposeless afternoon. The moments you seemed to be doing nothing were exactly when your brain had the space to reorganize information, to connect experiences, to give birth to something you hadn't seen before. Creativity doesn't arise from fullness. It is born of the right kind of emptiness, when the mind has a space, not because of lack, but because you've intentionally cleared out the unnecessary. The new ideas have a chance to merge. In meditation, this is called the beginner's mind. A state in which you are not bound by past experience, not carrying preconceptions, not rushing to judge, but simply listening and observing, as if everything is being seen for the first time. That state, almost a void in perception, is what leads to the most authentic forms of creativity. Great creatives don't chase after ideas. They cleanse themselves so that ideas can arrive. They don't force discovery. They create the conditions for revelation. And that condition is silence, stillness, the willingness to step into the void without panic, without rushing to fill it. They understand that if you fill an empty space too quickly, you reject the only thing that can come from true depth. We live in an era where even creativity has been industrialized. We're told we must think fast, respond fast, produce ideas continuously. But real ideas, the ones that make you different, do not come on a conveyor belt. They come as uncontrollable waves of inspiration, and you can only receive them if you are patient enough to create space. Empty space is not the death of thought. On the contrary, it is the most nourishing environment for deep and integrated thinking. In stillness, every experience you've had, every question you've ignored, every emotion you've repressed begins to find connection. Many people fear the void because they think, if I do nothing, I'll fall behind. But in truth, it is only when you purposefully do nothing that you go farther than anyone else. Because in those moments, you are not chasing the world. You are entering your own depth. And from that depth, you don't just work. You create. You don't just react. You initiate. You don't just exist. You build. The great artist is not afraid of the blank page. They love it because it's where they can begin again. The successful entrepreneur doesn't fear moments when revenue stalls. They see it as an opportunity to reshape their strategy. The leader doesn't panic when everything falls silent. They listen. They observe. They let things settle before making decisions. And that's why they lead, not because they have all the answers, but because they have the space to hear answers others cannot. You can begin this practice right now. No special tools, no workshops required, just the courage to pause, to not respond immediately, to let an incomplete idea sit without forcing it into form, to give yourself 15 minutes a day with no input whatsoever. At first, you'll feel uneasy, but that's a good sign, because it means you are entering your own depth. And in that depth, if you are patient, creativity will come. Not loud, not sensational, not flashy, but true and uniquely yours. Remember this, the empty space is not the end, it is the beginning of a thought, of a return, of a self no longer governed by reflex and pressure. And from that self, you are no longer just a follower in the current of the world. You become the one who creates the wave. We often think that to attain inner peace, to have an awakened mind, we must give everything up, leave ordinary life behind, become monks on high mountains, or retreat into deep forests. But no, you don't need to become a monk. You don't need to shave your head or live in seclusion in some remote corner of the world. You only need one thing that seems simple, but is one of the hardest things to do in today's world: the courage to turn off a part of the world that's dominating you. This isn't about shutting it off permanently. It's an intentional act, a conscious choice, a decisive shift from within. I will no longer let the world speak on my behalf, because if you don't turn part of the world down, you'll never be able to hear your own voice. Turning off part of the world means deliberately stepping away from the endless stream of news that exhausts you. It's when you refuse to scroll through yet another page of social media, even though your mind is already overwhelmed. It's when you close the door of information to open the door of sensation. Turning off part of the world means saying no to meaningless social gatherings, to invitations that drain your energy, to conversations where you know you're just playing a role, not truly present. Turning off doesn't mean being irresponsible. On the contrary, it's how you reclaim real responsibility, responsibility for your own peace, for the direction you're being pulled away from. Turning off is an act of maturity. It's the moment you realize that no one else can protect your clarity except you. Because the danger doesn't lie in misinformation, it lies in too much information. It robs you of time to digest, to think, to verify through your own experience. You become a reflex machine. Each day you consume thousands of mental fragments and unconsciously build a version of yourself you don't even recognize. You start living as if you're a product of the world instead of someone choosing how to interact with it. You don't need to be a monk, but you do need space. Space to breathe, space to feel, space to remember what truly matters to you. And you won't have that space unless you turn off a part of this world, at least for a few moments each day. Try to remember the last time you sat in silence, with no phone, no music, no words, just you and the space in front of you. How long has it been since you gave yourself such a moment? How long since you looked out the window without any purpose? How long since you did nothing? Not out of laziness, but from a conscious decision to create stillness. That's why you feel disconnected, why you feel exhausted without knowing why. Because your mind hasn't had a single moment of real rest. It's no longer recharged from within. Because you haven't given it the chance. It's pulled, flooded, manipulated. And then you wonder, why am I no longer inspired? Why do I always feel like something is missing? The answer isn't that you're lacking, but that you're overloaded. Too much noise, too much information, too much scattered attention. And what you need isn't more, it's less. You don't need another skill, you need the courage to let go of a habit. You don't need someone new to talk to, you need the strength to sit quietly with yourself. You don't need to become a monk, you just need to be brave enough to step back from the world, to see clearly where you're standing. Someone once asked, how do I find clarity again? The answer doesn't lie in running far away. It lies in whether you dare to turn inward, whether you dare to sit down in your familiar room, turn off all devices, place your hand on your chest, and listen to your own breath. At first it will be hard. Your mind will resist. You'll feel bored, feel empty. But if you patiently stay, you'll discover something. Stillness doesn't kill you, it saves you. And once you feel that, you won't need to run anymore. You won't need to live in panic out of fear of being left behind, because you've found a place that the world cannot take from you. That place is you. And from that place, every action you take will be deeper, steadier, and truly yours. Not for validation, not for competition, but to live fully. So, give yourself a simple but powerful gift. Turn off a part of the world today. Just 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Do nothing, receive nothing, just you and you. Nothing to achieve, and that very nothingness is what helps you find everything. There is a strange moment on the journey of inner growth. It is when you suddenly realize you are no longer being pulled by everything around you. A message comes in, you don't rush to respond. A debate arises, you don't immediately jump in to prove your point. An opportunity appears, you no longer hastily grab it out of fear of missing out. That is the moment you begin to stand firm, not because you've mastered the world, but because you've stopped letting the world master you. In the past, you always felt swept along. Other people's emotions dictated your mood. The news decided your mental state. A compliment or a criticism could make you euphoric or crushed in a heartbeat. And that created a tiring loop. You lived in reaction instead of intention. You didn't truly choose, you just reflexively responded. But in the very moment you begin to stay with yourself, to observe without rushing to respond, you've entered a new state. You've begun living from the inside out, not pushed and pulled by the outside anymore. This doesn't mean you've become indifferent. On the contrary, when you stand firm, you begin to feel everything more clearly. You listen more deeply. You begin to distinguish what is a true voice from within and what is just external noise. Like a leaf floating on a lake, if the surface is constantly rippling, the leaf will always drift. But if the water stills, the leaf settles. Quietly, peacefully, you are the same. The calmer your mind, the less you're swayed, and the easier it is to see the right direction. One of the clearest signs of standing firm is that you no longer try to become someone. You no longer feel the need to be like anyone. You're no longer pressured by social standards or by someone else's definition of success. You stop, look inward, and start asking the question that truly matters. What is right for me? And from that question, a quiet strength is born, a strength that doesn't come from controlling others, but from controlling yourself. That strength helps you stay grounded when everything around you turns chaotic. It doesn't stop the storms, but gives you a place of shelter within. And when others panic, you stay calm. When others doubt, you remain steady. When others flee, you continue walking. Not because you're stubborn, but because you've learned to turn inward, to listen to yourself, and to act from there. You could call it maturity. You could call it inner strength. You could call it a connection to your true essence. Whatever name you give it, one thing is clear. You are no longer a victim of circumstances. You no longer need to be accepted in order to feel worthy. You are no longer thrown between right and wrong, good and bad, love and hate. You begin to see the bigger picture, the deeper layer, where everything that happens has a purpose. And you no longer need to control it all to feel at peace. This journey is not a straight line. There will be moments when you're pulled again, days when you forget what you've learned. But as long as you've once known what it feels like to stand firm, you'll always be able to return to it. That's the most valuable part. Like someone who's learned to swim. They might sink, but they no longer fear the water. You're the same. Once you've lived from awareness, you'll never again feel comfortable living unconsciously. From that place of groundedness, every relationship in your life also transforms. You no longer love to fill a void, but from wholeness. You no longer work for recognition, but from internal conviction. You no longer live to prove anything, but to experience life deeply and fully. And that quite naturally draws to you the right people, the right opportunities, and meaningful experiences. Because you're no longer clinging. Everything starts arriving more gently, more healthily. Standing firm doesn't mean standing still. It means acting from the root, not being yanked around by external disturbances. It's when you choose how to respond instead of merely reacting. It's when you can see clearly what you're doing, why, and have the ability to stop if it no longer feels right. That is the highest form of freedom. Not because you have more, but because you no longer depend on anything to feel complete. When you stand firm, you no longer need to control the world. You only need to control yourself. And that inner stability is what changes everything outside. It's not a victory seen from the outside in, it's a victory from the inside out. A triumph over restlessness, over doubt, over fear, so you can truly live the life your essence was born to live. We live in an era where everyone is trying to be heard. On social media, in real life, in conversations, everyone wants to speak more, share more, express more. But ironically, never before have people felt so ignored, so dismissed, so misunderstood, because most of us are mistaking something fundamental. That in order to be heard, we must speak louder, show more, stand out more. But that's an illusion. The truth is completely different. You don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to be deeply present. Deep presence is not a spotlight. It is not loud, not flashy, but it has an inner gravity that makes others unable to look away. When you are truly present, with full attention, with wholeness from within, then even if you say little, others can feel it. Even if you simply sit in silence, others can still hear what you're conveying. Because the energy of truth, of depth, always carries farther than 1,000 shallow words. Think back to the people who truly impressed you in life. They didn't always speak the most, but every time they appeared, you could feel their steadiness. They didn't rush to prove themselves. They didn't need praise. They didn't force themselves to be someone. They were simply there, fully, authentically. And that alone made them respected, heard, remembered. So how can you become deeply present? First, you must return to yourself. A deeply present person is not distracted by judgment. They don't perform. They don't seek validation. They speak what they truly believe, live what they truly understand, and do what they truly choose. That's why their words carry weight. Not because the language is special, but because there is alignment between thought, emotion, and action. They are a unified whole. And in a world full of fragmentation, that is rare and precious. You cannot be deeply present if your mind is full of contradictions, if you say one thing but do another, if you act cheerful while your heart is full of doubt, if you seek connection but are afraid of being hurt. When your inner world is fragmented, the energy you emit is broken too. Others will find you hard to trust, hard to grasp, hard to connect with. But when you begin to make peace with yourself, when you stop running from your weaknesses, when you accept both the light and shadow within you, you start to become whole. And a whole person doesn't need to shout. They just need to be there. Real enough, clear enough, deep enough. In important conversations, the one who talks the most is not the one in control. It's the one who knows how to listen, who knows when to pause. That carries true depth, because they don't just hear the words, they hear the silence. They don't just process the content, they sense the energy beneath it. And this can only happen when you are truly present, when your mind isn't wandering, when you're not thinking about what to say next, when you're not trying to impress, but simply showing up as yourself. You can bring this into every area of your life. In your family, instead of yelling, be present enough for your child to feel heard without judgment. At work, instead of arguing to defend your opinion, be still enough for others to feel the solidity in your thinking. In love, instead of constantly asking the other to change, become a version of yourself so whole that they never want to walk away. Every lasting connection begins with full presence. You don't have to change your essence. You just need to clear away the noise covering your inner truth. The fear of rejection, the obsession with success, the doubt that says, I'm not enough. All these things make you talk more, try harder, constantly pushed to be heard. But the truth is, the most profound person is not the one who speaks the best, but the one who has walked honestly through their inner world. One day you'll stop trying to convince others that you are worthy, because you'll already know that in silence. And that inner certainty is what makes you stronger than any proof. Others won't be able to overlook you, not because you seek attention, but because you are someone they feel safe with, someone they trust, someone they want to listen to. Remember, the world is not lacking in noise. What it lacks is people who are truly present. If you can become one of them, you won't need to shout anymore. You just need to be yourself with enough depth, enough awareness, enough steadiness. You've been through the waves. You've heard enough words. You've tried to live by too many templates, ideals, and expectations. And then one day, you feel tired, not because you're weak, but because it's been too long since you touched the silence within you, the original home, the primal foundation of your being. In that space, there are no roles, no obligations, no musts or permissions. There is only one thing, truth. And you begin to realize that is the place you need to return to, not to escape, but to begin again as the strongest version of yourself. Silence is not surrender. Returning to silence doesn't mean you stop striving, stop acting, or detach from the world. On the contrary, it is the highest act of intention, intentionally pausing, intentionally cleansing, intentionally regenerating. Silence is not emptiness. It is the deepest black canvas upon which you can redraw the picture of your life with the clearest lines. And only when you dare to stand in that space, no color, no sound, no guidance, do you truly see the map within yourself. There are things you cannot hear in the noise. There are whispers that only rise when you've been silent long enough. And there is a version of yourself, deeper, more peaceful, more powerful, that only appears when you stop trying to become someone and start living as yourself. That version does not need to prove anything. It doesn't crave attention. It doesn't follow anyone. Because it wasn't born from lack, it was born from fullness, from a place that needs nothing else to be whole. When you return to silence, you begin to see life through new eyes. The things that used to hurt you, you no longer need to resist. The things that once fascinated you, you no longer cling to. The things that used to panic you, you begin to see them as necessary parts of growth. You don't avoid, and you don't fight. You simply accept, but not give up. Love, but not attach. Live, but not be blindly led. That is awareness, the sole outcome of a journey deep enough, honest enough in silence. From that void, you begin to choose again, not to escape fear, but to live by your values, not choosing by old habits, but by the voice within. Not acting to fill time, but acting from clarity. Every step you take afterward is no longer random. It is guided. It is not pulled by fleeting emotions. It is nurtured by long-term vision, a vision born from silence deep enough. You may notice that the world hasn't changed. It's still noisy, still chaotic, still urging you to run faster, higher, more. But you're no longer the same. You move slower, but steadier. You are no longer swept into every game. You know when to step forward and when to hold back. Because you no longer need to win in the eyes of others, you just need not lose yourself. And that is a new definition of success. Not having more, but losing less. Especially not losing your essence. You may lose a few old relationships. You may no longer fit into familiar conversations. You may feel alone in those early days of returning to silence. But soon you'll see that solitude is not frightening. It is clear, authentic, and nourishing. It doesn't make you cold. It makes you awake. Because not everyone can go with you to such depths. But once you've been there, you'll know. You don't need anyone to walk with you. You just need not betray yourself. And when you live from that state, you begin to create real impact. No longer the impact of shouting, making noise, or proving, but quiet influence. That pierces deep. Your words are fewer, but timely. Your actions are gentler but more effective. Your presence is not dazzling, but others feel safe around you. And that's what creates lasting difference. You no longer try to leave a mark. You are the mark. In the end, returning to silence is not the end. It's a beginning, but a new kind of beginning. Not driven by motivation, but by direction. Not reactive, but intentional. Not seeking ego, but grounded in truth. In that version of you, there's no need to brace to be strong, no need to equip more to be worthy. You only need to remember who you are. And that alone will lead you back to the path you've always searched for. A path that needs no noise, but is full of energy. Needs no spotlight, but can light up an entire life. Silence is not a void, but the necessary stillness to reconnect with yourself in a world that never stops shouting, where everyone wants to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be respected. The one who knows how to withdraw, how to stay still, how to pause and recalibrate the internal flow is the one who is truly moving forward. The greatest lesson is not in what new things you learn, but in whether you dare to let go of the old noise, to hear again the true voice within you. You don't have to become someone else. You don't need to live in a monastery. You just need to dare to shut off a part of the outer world to turn on a whole gateway within. And when you live from that still space, you are not just more peaceful, but also stronger, more precise, more luminous in every action. From part 1 to part 12, this journey has not taken you away from the world, but brought you closer to yourself. It doesn't require you to become, but invites you to return. Return to your original wholeness, to your unlost creative energy, to the version of you that needs no proof, because you are already enough. If you've read this far, I want you to pause, not to rest, but to receive, to realize no lesson is more important than learning to sit with yourself. No power is greater than peace that doesn't require control. No achievement is bigger than awakening within your own life. You don't need to wait for any more conditions. No need for more time, more age, more understanding. Just one decision: to pause, to listen, to return. And then you'll see silence takes nothing from you. It only returns everything that was always yours from this moment forward,